maintain the life, look, and value of your motorcycle for years to come. Learn more at slickproductsusa.com.
Hi, and welcome to Dirtbike Magazine's 2021 250 Motocross Shootout. It's a good year for 250 four-strokes. Up front, we have to tell you this is the best group of motocross bikes we've ever collected and the hardest shootout ever. They all can win, but they aren't all the same. Each is designed to appeal to a slightly different rider, and each has its own strengths and weaknesses. To explore this, we took them to a number of different tracks, including Elsinore Motorsports Park. After wearing out the stock tires, we continued testing on Dunlop MX33s on all 7 bikes. We weighed them all without fuel and ran them all in the Pro Circuit dyno. Eventually, the differences began to reveal themselves. Here's what we found. The newest addition to the class is the Gas MC250. As you probably heard, Gas is now controlled by Pereira Mobility, the parent company of KTM. As a result, the MC250 is built on the same platform as the KTM 250 SXF and the Husqvarna FC250. That doesn't mean it's the same. By having 3 different makes under its control, the company gets to send each in a different direction and aim for different buyers, whereas a single-line manufacturer is forced into a one-size-fits-all strategy. The Gas MC250 is softer, milder, and designed for a less hardcore rider than the KTM. It has the same engine and chassis, but different components, making it less expensive and less focused on high-end racing. It still has the same strong points as the other bikes in the group. It's still very light and very fast. On our scale, the Gas weighs 219 pounds, which is exactly the same as the Husky, but far lighter than any of the Japanese 250s. Since it also shares the same motor with the KTM-based bikes, it's powerful. The Gas is a screamer. It just has a slightly softer peak and doesn't over-rev quite as far. Peak output on the Pro Circuit dyno is 43.85 horsepower, or about a half a horse less than the KTM. It doesn't have a map switch, so you don't have a second option for power delivery or traction control. It also doesn't have launch control unless you pay extra for the switch. The fork and shock are the same WP components as the KTMs and Huskies. They're just a little softer. Suspension isn't the MC250's strongest point, although it wouldn't feel right to call it a weakness. It's just set up for a lighter, less aggressive rider. The main point of the Gas is to provide a bike for those riders who are less focused on racing and more budget-oriented. The Gas sells for $8,499, which is $900 less than the Husqvarna. Next, we have the Honda CRF 250R, a bike that didn't get any attention for 2021. Honda's R&D team was entirely focused on the 450 for 2021. That bike came out of the oven slightly undercooked, so we're happy that the 250 is unchanged. This has the same chassis as the 2020 CRF 450R with a coil spring Showa fork and a hammerhead-shaped Showa shock. It still has twin pipes and a titanium tank. The left side of the handlebar is a switch that lets you choose from 3 different maps or access launch control. The Honda's strongest point is its overall handling. It's hard to find anyone who doesn't love the way it turns, fits, and feels. It's not especially light, 227 pounds without fuel, but you'd never know. It has light, easy feeling handling and is surprisingly narrow as long as you don't obsess on the twin pipes, which long-legged riders might occasionally notice. The one area where the Honda truly shines is overall comfort. It's a bike that just feels right no matter who you are. The levers, the seat, the bar bend, everything is just right. The Honda is also very fast on top. That might not mean as much this year because the KTM powered bikes are also so powerful, but they're all screamers. In the last 4 years, the whole class has stepped up in the power department. Peak power was measured at 42.52 horsepower. Sadly, most of these bikes have lost power down low, especially the Honda. It doesn't even get serious until around 9,000 RPM. For some riders, that's a big issue, although most 250F riders have learned to rev it by now. Overall suspension is another strong point for the Honda, but once again, it has competition in that area. Job one is taking hits, and the CRF 250R is great in that category, although some riders might complain that it can be a little nervous at speed. Overall, we still love the Honda, and at $79.99, it's one of the least expensive bikes here. This is an interesting year for the Husqvarna FC250. In the past, it was difficult to separate the KTM and the Husky. There were differences like the bodywork, the airbox, the rims, and the bars, but in the big picture, they weren't enough to make the Husky stand out. For 2021, it's a different story. Husqvarna shortened the suspension on all of its 2021 motocross bikes. It was a brilliant move. The seat height is over an inch lower than it was last year, and it gives virtually everyone more confidence. Young riders like it everywhere, and even taller riders find the bike is more manageable on starts. So does that result in a decrease in suspension performance? Not that we can tell. The action of the WP air fork is actually greatly improved over last year, which is a welcome change. Overall, the bike still has the same strengths as always. It's light at 219 pounds without fuel, so it turns well. It is super easy to toss around. And of course, it's very, very fast. The Husky's peak is 44.04 horsepower, way up at 13,790 RPM. These days, that's the norm in the 250 class. At low RPM, the Husky still feels a little weak, although the dyno insists that it's not. The issue is that it's geared tall and doesn't respond well to half-throttle efforts. The Husky likes to be held wide open, even at low RPM. A more legitimate shortcoming is the decrease in ground clearance, which is noticeable in ruts. Then there's the price. At $93.99, the Husqvarna is the most expensive bike here. The Kawasaki KX250 came into this comparison as one of the favorites. It's all new for 2021 and has electric start at last. The motor is entirely new, although it does use the finger follower valve train that was introduced last year. It also got a hydraulically actuated clutch with a cone disc spring and the exact same frame and bodywork as the current KX450. Unlike the 450, the KX250 uses KYB suspension components. The first thing you notice about the new KX is that it's a screamer. Sound familiar? This is a common theme among the 2021 250s. In this case, it was even more noticeable because it was a real tractor just 2 years ago. Now it makes a ton of power, all on top. On the Pro Circuit dyno, it makes 43.9 horsepower. The KX has an all-or-nothing personality. We've always believed that the motor is a big factor in a bike's overall handling manners, and the KX250 proves that point. The KX450 is a calm, polite machine, whereas the 250 with the exact same frame feels a bit hyperactive and high-strung. It's all about that revvy new 250 power plant with its amped-up personality. Another factor might be the KYB suspension, which is more active than the Showa fork and shock on the 450. It still ranks well in the suspension department, but the KX250 is a little on the soft side for many riders. Oddly, the Kawasaki is the heaviest bike in the class, at 228 pounds without fuel. You wouldn't think that. This year the price went up by $500, but it's still in the middle of the class at $82.99. KTM has been the driving force in the 250 class for a long time. It was the first with electric start, it was the first with a finger follower valve train, hydraulic clutch, and on and on. With that said, the 250 SXF has very few changes for 2021, and in fact, it hasn't had any major changes for a long time. It remains the lightest bike in the class at 218 pounds without fuel. The only significant change worthy of mention for this year is the WP Exact air fork, which now has a new mid-valve and bottoming system. Suspension was the area that needed attention the most. If you're familiar with the way the KTM ran in the past, you already know what to expect here. It's a fast, high RPM screamer. It won the dyno war by a very slight margin with 44.22 horsepower. The motor is geared a little tall, and it works best with a lot of throttle, just like the other two bikes with the same motor. If you had to pick one thing that still stands out about the KTM, it's the way it turns. The 250 SXF has excellent cornering manners. Its lightweight is a big factor here, but overall geometry and layout get some credit too. The improved fork action is definitely welcome, but we still can't list suspension among the KTM's strongest points. The air fork has a certain characteristic that can be noticeable in some turns. After you think it's all settled and ready for power, the front end sometimes rides up. Some riders complain, others don't notice. In the KTM strategy of offering 3 different bikes for 3 different riders, the 250 SXF is the one made for the most serious racer. The harder you try, the better it works. Still, with 3 bikes sharing so much, we can't help but wonder if the other 2 will rob sales from the KTM. It's the second most expensive at $9,299. The internet has had a field day with the Suzuki RMZ 250. By coming in late without any changes, it's a magnet for scathing comments and snarky remarks. For the record, Suzuki knows the RMZ 250 hasn't had any big changes in a long time. But for now, that means it has a legitimate segment of the market all to itself. It's a simple bike for the MX purist. It has no electric start, so it has no battery, no regulator, no complex wiring harness. Plus, it's torquey and easy to ride. One by one, all the others have re-aimed their bikes at the top of the market with high revving motors that demand more effort and commitment. The Suzuki doesn't have to be screamed and ringed out, so novices and beginners will find it easier to ride. Still, the fact remains that it peaks out at only 39.14 horsepower. That's disaster for racing in the more advanced classes. It's still a bike that handles exceptionally well. Back in the day, Suzuki was famous for cornering. That hasn't changed. But several of the other makers have cracked the code in that department. The RMZ 250 is no longer the best handling bike in the class. It's just very good. Despite having no electric start, it weighs 227 pounds without fuel, the same as the Honda and the Yamaha. The current generation of the RMZ is also a little unbalanced with soft rear suspension. We don't mind when a bike goes unchanged, but as far as suspension is concerned, Suzuki should have stopped one generation earlier. It is the least expensive of the group at $7,899. Yamaha gave the YZ250F a long list of small changes for 2021. Most of them were previewed on the YZ450F a year earlier. That includes frame revisions, new motor mounts, a new airbox, and a lot of small details. The motor has its own changes, including a straighter intake tract, a new cam, a new muffler, and new ECU settings. All this was done in hope of finding a little more peak power without sacrificing torque. That was what kept the Yamaha from winning the 2020 Shootout. It simply wasn't as fast as some of the others. Did Yamaha achieve its goal? Absolutely. The 2021 YZ250F still isn't the fastest in the class, but it's in the hunt, with a peak of 42.6 horsepower. The best part is that it didn't lose any low-end response. Yamaha isn't one of those bikes that requires a huge handful of throttle before it reacts. It starts moving from the first crack of the grip. That doesn't really show up on a dyno curve, but it's clear when you ride the bike. As the revs climb, the YZ never has a big power surge, and it doesn't quite rev as far as some of the others, but it's easy to keep in the meat of the power band. If you really want a little more top, you can have it with the Yamaha Power Tuner smartphone app. Virtually all our riders preferred Yamaha's over-rev map, which you can find in the full test on dirtbikemagazine.com. The Power Tuner is not a gimmick. It's a legitimate tuning tool, and so far there's nothing quite like it. Yamaha also seems to have everyone covered in the suspension department. The Yamaha fork and shock works so well that it's a little boring year after year. Smaller riders might say it's a little on the stiff side, but even they confess that it's still pretty good. The YZ does have a few sore points. It feels like it's the heaviest in the group, even though it's exactly the same as the Honda and Suzuki. It's also a little cramped for taller riders, but overall, even the Yamaha's hardest critics admit that the 2021 model has very little to complain about. The YZ250F sells for $8,299. We've done a lot of shootouts over the years at Dirtbike, but we have to confess, coming up with a winner in this group was one of the toughest jobs we've ever faced. Not only are there 7 bikes, but 3 of them have the same motor and 6 of them make nearly the same peak power. When we looked at it objectively, though, we had to admit that one bike has universal appeal to all riders of all skill levels. The Yamaha YZ250F has the peak power and the suspension to satisfy most advanced riders, and it has the manageability and the tunability to appeal to young novices fresh from the mini ranks. That's a pretty good trick. For the full story, including the rankings of all 7 bikes, go to dirtbikemagazine.com and check out these bikes from the other models in the Dirtbike 2021 video motocross series. Thanks for watching.